Last Monday was Raw 30.
Yep,
Apparently
I watched it.
there was one whole woman on the Raw 30 and it was Medusa, and she was in a segment with APA as she was playing poker with him, I believe.
Yep.
And that was it.
Yep.
Charlotte
correct.
apparently, Charlotte referenced the Bellas in her promo that she cut, but that was pretty much it. The whole first hour was bloodline related, and it ran long, and it led to the cage match, the advertised cage match.
Well, the cage match got axed.
Becky and Bayley got axed, and so people were during the show and after where they got a couple. They actually had a couple hashtags trending. They had the Give WWE Women a Chance, which is similar to the Give Divas a Chance that was popular a few years ago. And then it was WWE Women Deserve Better was the other hashtag that was trending on Monday. I saw people using it on Friday as well, because apparently there was only one women's segment on Friday. There was some people who were trying to say that, oh, they didn't have women on Raw 30 because they were going to be in the Royal Rumble. That turns out that was a lie.
They had like the worst part of the show. They like rushed their Rumble and
yeah. So it was just not a good look. And then the Bella twins went on, I guess, like Instagram Live to talk about what happened, and they just said that they apparently were not happy with how they would have been presented had they been on the show, so they made the decision they went to Wicked instead. They have to went to Broadway.
Essentially, what I heard was
and then they
didn't like how they were going to be presented, and that they were like, no.
And then they made the point that they can't bring up Mercedes/Sasha because Sasha's too big and she's not there anymore.
They can't bring up Naomi. They can't bring up
Saraya, and any of their contributions, and so they were just like, we're not going to be part of it. Like, and I completely understand that. And they actually went on Tamron Hall, and I saw a little clip that was online, and they were just like, Tamron couldn't understand. She was like, but women have been there for 30 years, like the whole 30 years. Like, why couldn't they be honored in a way that like the men were? And they were just like, yeah, they just decided that, I guess that's not how they wanted to do it, and we didn't want to be a part of it. And I mean, I'm not really surprised, because I don't keep up with Raw and SmackDown, but a lot of what I hear is that NXT presents their women a lot better and have been for months. And the thing was, oh, WWE is going to be better under Triple H. Well, the women's booking hasn't been better under Triple H. It's been pretty much the same. And like, even when I stopped timing women's matches in October of 2021, the reason I did that is because of how they were booking the women. Like, it got frustrating watching how they were treating them and how they were getting, like, they would go on commercial and the match would start during the commercial break. So then they'd only get like 4 or 5 minutes,
basically.
Or they were putting Lana through a table 10 episodes in a row, and the payoff was dumb. And then like, they can't book Asuka for crap. Then they would bring Charlotte in, and they had the tag titles, and then they only defended it like twice or whatever. Like, just all these.
They haven't done anything with the tag titles in this short period of time I've been watching. I mean, they don't carry them around is pretty much what they do.
Yeah, they don't care about those
titles. And actually,
you have it on Charlotte and Asuka, and you can't do anything with those titles.
You mentioned it recently in a conversation that we were having, and when I saw what they were doing on Friday night, I was like, Sam nailed it. She's so right. They just don't give about the women's titles or the tag titles, especially the tag titles.
Yeah. They never have, and Sasha and Bayley fought so hard for those. And that's a part of, like, people keep saying, oh, Mercedes left because of money. No, she left because of creative and how they were booking her and how they were booking those titles, because they don't care. It doesn't mean anything to them. And so they're never going to care about them. And so It's really frustrating that, like, I mean, Give Divas a Chance was 5 years ago, I think. And they're still having to fight for the same crap. And it's really disheartening. And look, AEW is not perfect. We complain all the time about how they book their
Mhm.
women, but WWE is not any better, except for NXT, which it seems like NXT's always got a lot going on. Daza said NXT has always been a lot better in promoting the women. They made the four horsewomen and Asuka and Shayna. And so, yeah, they did. And I loved, especially in that period of NXT, that was like one of my favorite times. And part of that was to how they booked the women. Um, and it's really frustrating to see that this company touts itself as being progressive with women, and then they and the woman who created the women's division resigned 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, that was something you just reading my mind. Get out of my head, Sam. I was just
Sorry.
literally in my mind. I was just thinking, and Stephanie McMahon is gone. Like,
Yep.
and she's
And
the
she's
only person that has like the biggest advocate for the women's division is gone now.
right. And now I guess the next biggest would maybe be TJ Wilson, because he trains the women and he works really hard to, he agents a lot of their matches. And I will say real quick, I don't think we brought it up before. I heard that Jason Cade helped agent the women's Royal Rumble last night, and I'm really excited for him because Jason Cade is somebody who wrestled in PWX for several years. He went down to WWE. He did some stuff with them. He has helped train some of the women. He has helped TJ train some of the women. So I'm really glad that he got that opportunity last night because Jason is great and I'm so happy for him. Brad, so Stephanie resigns and the women end up with less time in stories. A coincidence? Well, it depends on how involved Stephanie was beforehand, but probably not. And Vince is back.
It seemed pretty obvious. I mean, this was certainly everything from Monday to the Royal Rumble felt like Vince was back.
That's what I've heard people saying. And then,
I mean, just from my experience, like it was like, oh, look, it's the same thing again.
yeah. And I did hear a clip of Bailey talking about what happened on Monday as far as their match goes. And she was saying, like, they weren't upset about it. They understood why. Damage control looked great because it put them, because of, they attacked Becky and like they are like, they made the best of the situation, which, yeah, they did.
Well, they have to.
But
What are they
yeah,
going to do?
exactly. But it's always the women's matches who get cut. When they need to cut stuff for time, it's always the women's matches. That's why so many women's matches were 2 minutes when I was timing them and even before I timed them. That's why Give Divas a Chance started happening in the first place, because they would be cut out completely or their matches would be cut down to nothing. And so it's the same shit that it was 5 years ago. And then I was like, what is Bailey gonna say?
Yeah. What's she going to say?
She's gonna say, "Oh, I understand." Of course they're gonna make the best of it because they're professionals and they know what needs to be done. And so they did, from what I understand, do the best that they could in that situation. But they could have cut so many other things, and it's always the women that get they take the punishment for it. And like, I know Lance Storm tried to justify it and Brian Alvarez tried to justify it, but there is not a justification when it's always the women, or it's 9 out of 10 times it's the women who's getting their stuff cut. Like, I understand, we know ad breaks, like, most of us aren't dumb, like, we understand with live TV, like, you have to make sure you factor all this stuff in. But that wasn't on top of it being the women's, it was an advertised cage match. Like, how do you not make time for that? Like, I don't understand that you couldn't cut, like, the bloodline stuff. I know it's a big story, especially leading into Royal Rumble, but you could have cut parts of that. They didn't have to do the backstage segments with the APA. They didn't have to bring back Teddy Long, who is a Vince McMahon apologist. They didn't have to bring in Hulk Hogan, who has a myriad of issues for
Oh, God.
Ric Flair. Like, you bring all these people back, but you can't cut you cut the women's cage
Yeah,
match?
they could have dumped that entire. All Ric Flair did was come out, do his gimmick, and introduce Charlotte, and they hugged, and it was like, why?
Yeah, it was just it's.
Why?
And then you see what
I
the
mean,
Rumble
I'll give
last.
it on that. There was a couple of really just pointless. Okay, what is this for?
Right.
But
Yeah, and I know it's the nostalgia thing, which they
yeah,
rely
the
on so much. And yeah, and sure, it's a 30th. Yeah, I heard the DX segment was
it went
basically the same,
way too
and it was
long.
basically the same stuff they do every
They just let them go on and on. Someone should have been standing there like, wrap it up, guys. Wrap it up.
Yeah,
We get it. It's like
it's the same stuff, like, every time they bring DX out, they do the same thing, like, it's nothing new, and yeah, I get it's the 30th episode, so you're gonna bring like, that
it's
whole
fine,
thing,
but
I
you can do
get.
it in like 10 minutes. It doesn't need to take 25.
No, and not at the expense of a women's match.
It was way too long. That part
Yeah,
was
and then so then
way
last
too
night in
long.
the Royal Rumble, the only person they brought back was Michelle McCool, and she's sitting
Audience.
in the audience, and she's, like, just gets in the match, and then she's not in it very long, and it's just it's so frustrating. It's the same old
And
shit.
on we WWE go.
Yeah. So it's really frustrating for this shit to be happening in any company, but in this company that touts itself, like, I mean, Triple H was out there in the press conference talking about how they do spectacle better than anybody else and just kissing his own ass and the company's ass, which,
That's what
of
they
course he's gonna
do.
do. It's his job.
That's what they do.
That's what they do, but it's just it's that way for the men. It's not that way for the women most of the time. You can't book you still can't book them. They've Brad said they've been doing this for 30 years and still have timing issues that were bad. Right? You think
I
they'd get
know,
that figured
yeah.
out by
After
now.
30 years, I mean, it's like AEW is 3 years old, so you can almost forgive the fact that their production sometimes, like the audio is off, or they're like, or
Or
what,
cutting
going
to the
4 years.
crowd instead of when they
And
should
so,
be showing
yeah,
Jay Briscoe. And I'm like, what are you
exactly.
doing?
But at the same time, like, I mean, but that's
It
like they set the WrestleMania thingy on fire twice last year, so
Yeah. Nikki said Carney gonna Carney, and
yeah, exactly
that's
right.
in reference to Triple H. Because yeah, Triple H was given some Carney stuff. Daza said, so glad you're talking about all this crap because a lot of podcasters cough cough avarice don't see this sort of thing when it comes to the women. Well, and part of it's probably because we are women, but it's also because
What?
we've watched the same crap for we've watched this happen for decades and nothing is changing, and it's 2023 and we're still having this conversation about women's match times getting cut on a regular basis. It would be one thing if it was occasional and things happen, but it's always when it's cut for time, it's always the women, and it's always like that. They used to be that was the stupid joke was that the women's matches were the
Bathroom break.
bathroom break.